So for this session, I'm delighted to present the GRULAC, the Group of Consulates General of Latin American and the Caribbean countries in Boston. I'm more than happy to see you here. Consul General of Brazil, Mrs. Gilvania Oliveira, Consul General of Mexico, Mr. Emilio Rabasa, and Consul General of Guatemala, Mr. Jorge Alberto Figueroa. Also, this panel will be led by Mr. Westy Egmont, Associate Professor of Global Practice and Director of the Immigrant Integration Lab. Thank you so much for joining us. Also, I want to I want to thank the other representative of the Latin American consulates who are here, Graciela and another consulate who are here. So thank you so much. All yours, Westy.
Who is at the front line in terms of helping the diaspora become both integrated into the United States as well as to remain connected to their country or to have the services that help bridge the two worlds in which they have lived. It is the Consulates, and I am very honored to join these three remarkable leaders. If you've been in my role, one of the things you realize is that there are some traits among our southern neighbors to the United States, among the consular corps, and that is they tend to send remarkably bright, well-educated people to come and work in the United States. And I think it's sometimes an embarrassment to me to visit with some of our own diplomatic corps and think they're not quite up to par in terms of the level of international sophistication and education. So I'm really delighted with the folks that we get to introduce and spend time with today. You've already heard an introduction just a moment. You have written introductions. I don't want to go over that again except to say that Emilio Rabasa has done some remarkable work in the conflicts that have taken place in Chiapas. I visited UNAM last year, and it's a huge, incredible university, but he's brought his legal mind there as both a researcher and as a political scientist and an author of many books. Gilvania has brought us many lessons in her history working in Paraguay. She has worked in London and Warsaw and Bissau as well, and at the highest level working at the United Nations to be involved with the Security Council and issues of disarmament. Jorge comes to us with a wonderful responsibility for all of New England for Guatemala and has served in the Subdirectorate for Bilateral Foreign Policy in Asia, Africa, and Oceania. We have folks who have seen the world and bring lessons to us that I think are very important. I've asked them, and I'll see if this works, to not do 3 10-minute speeches, but for us to try to interact around some key questions. But I'm supposed to set the stage with some comments. So let me begin by saying that the Organization of American States, which is the oldest regional organization, represents 35 nations. I've been one of those crazy Americans who wakes up in the morning and think, you know, the Europeans did something really quite remarkable with the regional organization. They created a common border for security and opened up the labor market for all 28 countries inside of Europe. Just think how different the Americas would be if we honored each other with a similar mindset, to have a common international border, but to have a shared labor market and shared trade. We are living in a moment of incredible nationalism. An idea like that sounds even more radical today than it might have sounded under President Obama, but I think that we should be believers that we in the Americas have something in common and that we have to build that common life and common vision together. It's not an impossible dream as far away as it might be in this moment. We should come together today to appreciate also that our Latin American brothers and sisters represent an enormous part of the American story. Not only that we have half of the former Mexican territory that was taken by the United States after the North American invasion that marched its way across Mexico, but we have also found ourselves with 7 states that were formerly the states of Mexico, the northern portion of Mexico. But today we have 40 to 42% of all immigrants who come to the United States, if you look back over this last decade, 40 to 42% who come to us from Latin America. This is the lifeblood of this country. We cannot in any way have a deaf ear or a blind eye to how important this population flow is to us and to Latin America for other reasons, including the economic reality of remittances, as well as family connections. I would suggest also we want to take a moment to appreciate that what we're living in is a moment where things have changed dramatically. Next year, by my count, 2020, will be the year when the world of visas and passports and closed borders was formalized. We forget that we have less than 100 years of the nations of the world living under the kind of regimes of sovereign nations that try to close their borders that we have today. It was considered impossible before the 20s. It virtually wasn't attempted. So we've seen something that's emerged, and it's gotten worse and worse instead of better and better as we've seen sovereign nations try harder and harder to put up walls and fences and to militarize their borders. This idea of hard borders and dealing with it through military means is really by itself something which I think needs to be challenged and thought about really substantially. It has a lot to do with the backdrop of the conversation today. We also, I was down in Nogales the other day, and one of the things in Nogales is one of my favorite little restaurants, has a picture of the U.S. border with Mexico, and the picture was 1958. It has a chain link fence, the gate is open, there are no guards, there's nobody there speaking to anybody who comes and goes. The nations interacted positively and warmly. So today we live with the reality that those borders are closed, but we still have Mexico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, El Salvador, and Jamaica as among the nations in our top 10 sending nations to the United States in our population. 690,000 people come from these countries to join the 1.1 million people we receive on average into the United States. What are we doing for those populations? How are those populations served? And how do we not only serve those populations, but how are those populations advancing on the journey to becoming American citizens in the United States, claiming the United States citizenship and/or full participation? And how radical would it be if, in fact, all of the Latinos of the United States exercised their political power and built the bridges that are necessary politically for themselves, for their families, and for our relationship with the rest of our brothers and sisters across the continent? This is, I think, a major set of questions for us to talk about. Today, we're going to talk about what consulates do and try to take a look at the fact that in our nation of 45 million, with 11 million people who are out of status, we have an enormous demand upon the consulates. So let me turn this back to our wonderful panel and ask you, if you would, to try in some quick order answers to talk about, first of all, how has the current administration changed the work of the consulate? How have each of you had to change what you do, since we change presidents every 4 to 8 years? How has this last change affected the work of the consulate? Emilio, would you like to begin?
Well, I could say that it has definitely done so. To the 50 offices which integrate the biggest consular network in any given country by Mexican offices here in the United States throughout the territory, almost one for each state, which is not the case. There are some states like California that might have 3 or 4, and there are other states like on the East Coast, the case of Boston, which covers 5 different states. Although the work of this network started to change even before the present administration, with not only new practices in protection, in promotion, in integration, because of the very large amount of Mexicans, by now almost 12 million people, Mexicans living here in the United States, part of the 35 million Mexican Americans that live in the United States, almost the size of Canada. So we had to reshape our network. But particularly during the present administration, include new programs, new actions in protection. We believe that the best way to protect people is informing people of their rights. Know Your Rights is one of our programs. Through different community gatherings, even in the church, universities, whatever, we've developed this Know Your Rights project. so they know what their rights have, even if undocumented, under the U.S. Constitution, and also show them how they can exercise those rights. For example, if detained, the right to remain silent, the right to call a lawyer or their consulate, etc., etc. Another very important program for the protection of our connationals is the legal consultancy network of lawyers that we have hired. We established a network of professional lawyers on migration, on civil law, on labor law, administrative, human rights, in order to provide a specific case-by-case protection in case it's needed. So the consulates have to look for these firms, select the best ones, and celebrate agreements for 3 years to have their services on a regular basis. This has worked very well in this area with good lawyers.
Let's come back and talk about other services and have a couple of other answers to this question, and we'll come back and talk about services. Ms. Oliveira?
Thank you very much, Professor Egmont. Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I think we do have very important questions being put to us here, and a very, I think, timely question as regards the work done by the consulates in the new context. What I can say is that, I mean, we have a number of initiatives. We work very closely with the community. It's a privilege for me to see here today many of the faces we see regularly when we go to the places where the Brazilian community lives. And then I mean Framingham, I mean Everett, I mean Somerville, I mean Stoughton. We are in different places. I can talk about that later. But let's go to your question. What has resulted of, let's say, of the new climate that we have? I have been writing repeatedly to Brasilia asking for more staff. I should say that I have been authorized to hire provisionally some more people because the work has increased a lot. The Consulate of Brazil in Boston has a regular program of visiting our people in detention centers, knowing about their situation, checking whether, I mean, they need some legal support, if we have to look for a pro bono lawyer, or if our consultant, we also have a consultant at the consulate who works with us on a basis of a number of hours. She does not represent anybody in court, but she tells us what the situation is. So there is a lot of pressure regarding that, and there is a lot of anxiety as well, because people are fearful. People are really in a situation where they find it difficult to go for information. They are afraid. They are seeing their co-nationals being deported. And very important in that regard, we have the numbers. There has been, in the case of the Brazilian community, a very significant increase. I wouldn't say 100%, but I can tell you that our work has almost doubled. Of course, we have to prepare the documents for the people. Of course, ICE, when they want to send someone back, they want us to be quick in what is our part of the, let's say, the job. But we always try to listen to people first. So we go there. I have 3 staff at the consulate, 3 people who I say, well, where is Mr. Rediger today? He's in prison. Well, where is Ms. So-and-so today? She's in such and such detention center, because they really go there and they see the people. We have a lot of partnerships in the communities, and they help us a lot. Thank you so much to all of you, because they help us convey the message, and they tell people, if you need guidance, if you need clarification, the Consulate of Brazil has a number of programs, and the doors are open, and the email is checked regularly. An enormous increase in that regard as well. So, summing up, more work. Of course, it's our job. People are more fearful. Of course, we feel sometimes really it's difficult. You're trying to do things and to improve people's conditions, but there is so much we can't do. So we have to do what we are here to do in accordance with the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations and try to help our people as much as possible. Thank you.
Wonderful. Senor Figueroa.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I think in the case of Guatemala, we are the same like Mexico and Brazil. We are in the same line. We have 3 million of our people here in the United States. It's like maybe 20% of the population of Guatemala. There's a lot of things to do. We have right now 19 consular missions, and we hope that we can open it for more. We also require more staff in our consular missions, and they provide us for more people for each consulate. And also they provide us a lawyer for the immigrant issues that they give free information to the Guatemalan people. Also, we work with a lot of programs that we have health programs that is our concern. I think this is, but is it the same that we working with Mexico and Brazil? It's the same name.
Everyone seems to be looking for a savior right at the moment, and one of the challenges outside of the faith is the question of the political realities. We're imprisoned in the United States about 442,000 people in our detention system last year. These are the citizens of your countries, predominantly these countries, in El Salvador and Haiti among those particularly high in the list. But I think that one of the things people must turn to in the consulates is, can you help? And the question is, can sovereign nations outside the United States do anything that addresses the problem of this enormous growth in detention and the criminalization of your citizens when they have no criminal background here in the United States, but they are detained, locked up, imprisoned without even access to bail? Anyone?
By all means, of course, sovereign nations should have a more stronger stand on this problem, I would say, on two ways or two approaches, on the bilateral one and on the multilateral one. On the bilateral one, by coming to terms with the government of this country, mostly at federal level, but also at local level, and find a permanent solution about this phenomenon of immigration, because I do not accept that the phenomenon of immigration, at least I'm talking about Mexico, is the consequence of a lack of opportunities of a shrinked economy of Mexico. It is true, yes, we are facing economic challenges as any other country in the world, higher rates of development, poverty, distribution of wealth, yes, but we must recognize that the fact that there is such a strong demand on this side of the border for a changing economy from a manufacturer economy to the economy now so-called of knowledge has required manpower that is not being provided in the United States. Therefore, it is brought from other countries. Let me just give you in less than a minute the case of Vermont. In Vermont, we have around 1,000 boys aged 20, 25 from Chiapas, my home state, Tabasco, Veracruz, who work at the milk farms. They get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, almost 12 hours nonstop, 6 days a week. Now, the Vermontians had told me, even the governor, they have no way to substitute that manpower. If they would be deported, the industry, the dairy industry of Vermont would collapse. So far we've been getting to solve the problem through an arrangement with Ben and Jerry, all of you know, but that's a different story. But this shows why the presence of these people who are now being detained and then sent to the jails is utterly unfair, because these people came here in response to a demand. So it's a bilateral problem, and the solution has to be bilateral between to sovereign states. The other way in which we can collaborate, and Mexico is doing its part, is through multilateralism. Mexico sponsored a resolution adopted in 2016 at the 71st General Assembly of the United Nations of a global compact on safe, orderly, and regular migration, which is now undergoing a strong negotiation in the United Nations. All countries except one have accepted to participate in this negotiation, which is about human rights of the migrants, development, economic contributions of the migrant to communities, etc. All countries except one.
Which
regrets
one?
to say the United States.
Well, thank you. This is very interesting information. Brazil is also part of those efforts. We just had a conference, the UNCHR conference in Brazil. Just like Mexico and our Latin American countries, we are part of the efforts regarding refugees and immigrants. Of course, our community here is not, I think, a community of refugees as understood in the UN Convention. People come here looking for better opportunities in life, and most are immigrants or who cannot put their situation in order. So different concepts, but they have a lot of elements in common. Brazil, as you know, now we're having our Venezuelan friends coming into the country. The convention is very important, and our national policy in that respect is, I would say, very open and very committed, and with a lot of solidarity. When we had the Haiti situation, I happened to be at that time the vice president of the Committee on Refugees in Brazil as a representative from our ministry, and we had policies for granting humanitarian visas for Haitians after the earthquake, and given, of course, the responsibilities we took in Haiti with the peacekeeping efforts and in a lot of other areas. So that was only coherent that we did the same, and we would like to see, of course, we would like to be able to negotiate at multilateral tables and bilateral tables policies that reflect our, let's say, our common humanity and our common challenges. But coming back to your question, which is on the prison, let's say, people serving prison sentences and people in deportation centers. These are two different categories. And as a matter of fact, we have two different people at the consulate dealing with that. We visit people serving prison sentences, convicted criminals as per the judgment here on a regular basis. Of course, there is a background to whatever might have happened, and it's our consular obligation to be present within what is permitted in the law, serve as in, let's say, a bridge between these people and families in Brazil or families here, and that is something we do regularly. Now, of course, we have situations like, someone who's been convicted, who understands his prison sentence or her prison sentence has been served, and this person says, it's time for me to get out, but I don't know what to do. Or they haven't come here to release me, right? Knowing about the system, getting information, being able to navigate the system. That is key in anything we talk about here today. In anything, I think Cardinal O'Malley mentioned that. Information. People are here. It's a different environment. Doing things in our own country sometimes can be difficult. It's just a matter of considering what it is like in a totally different country. So providing information, being a bridge, facilitating things, that's something we try to do as much as possible regularly. When it comes to deportation, of course, these are shorter periods. There are people who are trying to how do you say, they have They're trying to have their case heard again. So, I mean, people need information, and that's something we try to provide. But basically, I mean, there are many things we can't do. I mean, and that's something we say. I mean, I can't prevent you from being deported. I can tell you about what the due process of law, or not even myself, but the lawyer who works with us, what the due process of law establishes and what your rights are. So we work very much based on that. But we cannot. I mean, we cannot because, I mean, the world is organized on sovereignty lines. And of course, we have, I mean, we have to act accordingly. But information, support, being there is what is key and is what we can do.
That's great.
Thank you.
Senator Figueroa?
You know, when they said, some authorities said that all the immigrants are criminals, I think they are not right, because in the case of Guatemala, we only have 3,000 people who are convicted with criminal. So the other people are in the immigration centers. Sorry. Like I said, sorry. Can I take a minute, please? Yeah. Don't feel good.
Sure.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Take your time.
Go ahead.
All right. We should all be distressed about these hard facts and the reality, and the consuls often are at the front line of very difficult life situations. Let me turn the table a little bit. My academic work is on integration. And integration raises a whole different sort of agenda for consulates. It sounds a lot like social service and social work. But what do you do to facilitate the work that goes on between members in the diaspora? What do you do that you think facilitates peer development, human capital development, social welfare, just because people are facilitated out of their isolation into some kind of relationships?
Integration. Integration, as you've mentioned, it's a different situation.
Yes.
Integration calls for different forms, ways of relationship with the communities where these people live. We believe that a better integrated diaspora within the community makes it easier for them and for the community. How do we facilitate this? Well, first of all, there is one, natural way through economic activity. The upsurge of jobs, just the trade with Mexico has created through NAFTA 8 million jobs. Sorry, 6 million jobs and 8 million with Canada. 6 million jobs. Now, this is a way of integration, because through these jobs, chains of production have been produced all along the North American states, Canada, United States, and Mexico. These are now tied together. Let's say a car starts to be built in Canada, another parts in the United States, and other parts in Mexico. The fact that these chains have integrated the production of this car makes it good labor, good quality of labor, and cheaper to compete in the global market. So this has been a very strong way of integration, NAFTA, which is now undergoing, as all you know, negotiations. So if NAFTA falls apart, that would be a very, very hard hit to integration on the commercial economic side. Otherwise of integration are, of course, of social character. In that purpose, the Consulate of Mexico, throughout this network of 50 consulates, has developed what we call window services. We have a financial education window that seeks to offer information on banking, access to financial services, savings, and protection of family assets. IME scholarships contribute to the education of adults in English language learning and higher education. The health window offers preventive information about the main risks to health of Mexican immigrants and free or low-cost resources for their timely medical attention. So the tools and resources to start or increase assets in Mexico, housing acquisition, and opening of banks accounts. In other words, it's a set of programs whose main objective is precisely to facilitate the integration of our diaspora with other diasporas, and particularly with the community in the United States.
Significant answer of services, and within that, there's not a single soccer team mentioned.
Well, that's a very good point. We're so fond of soccer. Yes, at different community levels, we have clubs and groups, mainly kids, who are playing soccer and making teams with other Latin American kids and also with American kids. That's another way of integration. And church is a very, very crucial factor of integration.
It's kind of important to say to the Scalabrinis. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, facts aside.
Okay. So it's a question about integration. I'm sorry, my attention was...
The question was, in what way can the consuls participate to develop the human capital, the social security, human welfare, by creating relationships and facilitating in the diaspora a sense of community, but also facilitating their participation in the broader society after they've gotten here?
Yes. Okay, well, that's a very good question, because then it allows me to get back to our partners, the Scalabrini Centers, New England Community Center, and some of the others that are not represented here today. Yes, our consulate, I mean, just like Mexico, I mean, we call this the so-called second or third generation of consular services. Originally, the consulates issued passports, birth certificates, marriage certificates, powers of attorney. Okay, and that's part of the job, and that's a fundamental part of the job. And one that we continue, right, to carry on. Now, there are other needs. I mean, when we discuss the role of consulates abroad, we have this conference of Brazilians abroad, the Brazilian diaspora worldwide, and leaders from different places, they meet with the participation of representatives and also representatives from the ministry, and then issues are discussed. Like we have Margarete Shepard here. She was a representative to one of these meetings on women and domestic violence, the prevention of domestic violence and related issues. So from that, we arrive at policy or policy priorities. And policy priorities include, just like we were talking here, education, health, political education, very important, empowering women. We are lucky here, I share with you all the information that we are the first, and I think up to now, the only Brazilian diplomatic mission abroad to have a space, what we call the women's space. We have physical, we have premises, and we have policies, and people working too. On the one hand, prevention of domestic violence and help to those who may be subject to that situation, and on the other hand, empowerment. And when we talk about empowerment, of course, I mean, integration is part of that, because people have to get qualified. People have to know how to navigate the system. People have to know where they can go for help. So this was all part of, let's say, a set of initiatives like Mexico has that help people integrate into that society without, I would say, losing ties with their background, because we try to work as a bridge. In doing that, and I'll finish, I would just like to tell you that we are now in 10 different towns in Massachusetts. So we have a consulate in the financial district, and we have our partnerships in 10 different places. And on a rotating basis, there is always, every day, a Brazilian staff member from the consulate working with partners who are trained by us. Some of you are here who have learned how to interact with people, get their requests, help with forwarding requests for documents. And that helps a lot, because by going to these 10 different places all the time, we get to know more or better what the needs are, if someone was detained, if there is someone in hospital, and we try to bring cultural activities. Like in Stoughton now, we have a chorus that is with Brazilian songs, trying to connect people with the culture, and so on and so forth, education fairs. So this is basically, I mean, we try to be a helping hand, and a bridge, I would say.
For so long, we've thought of consuls and consul generals having a job of representing their government to develop trade and to deal with issues of passports and legal papers. But you're both telling stories that really go so far beyond that in terms of understanding. I was incredibly moved, and Emilio, you appreciate this, that I'm on the steering committee for the National Immigrant Integration Conference, and the government of Mexico gave $3 million to enable the nonprofit network to increase citizenship among Mexicans in the United States. Now, that's a huge statement. If you haven't thought about that, this is the government of Mexico investing in its population here, believing it's valuable for people to become part of the body politic and to have voice and power and be settled.
I'm glad you mentioned this, because I omit a very, very strong integration factor, which is dual citizenship.
Yes, that's
In
my
Mexico,
question exactly.
we just made a constitutional reform in 1998 for our citizens to be able to hold a double citizenship. Before that, you couldn't. If you had another one, you lose the Mexican ones. And a very wide survey that we conducted here, people wouldn't like to get the American one because they were afraid of losing the Mexican one. They wanted to retain. Maybe they didn't want to go back, but they wanted to be Mexicans here. So this solved the problem. And now we are providing all sorts of information in our offices for people who go there. Even there is the program that is called something like, you won't lose yours if you get the other. So they will not be afraid of having. We have supported very much offices here. I'm proud to mention the case of Sarato. What's the name of the lady? Sarato. Cerrato. What's her first name? Veronica Cerrato, which last year was recognized by the mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, who is just dedicated to facilitate, explain, do all the paperwork of Latinos in general and Mexicans in particular to obtain their double nationality. This has been, yes, I'm glad you brought it up, a very strong factor of integration.
And it's the rise of transnationalism of a whole new generation that really understands itself,
Definitely.
not having to cut off its feet or its tongue, but to become bicultural, bilingual, and binational.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, that's also very important, and that was incorporated into our constitution in 1988, so the dual nationality possibility, and that's why we had last year about 1,500 birth certificates registered at the consulate. So kids who are born here and who come to us, and we are always conveying the message that they have to come, because when there are demands regarding consular assistance, for example, in hospitals or Department of Children and Families, anything that will require us as a consulate to act, of course, we have to act on behalf of a Brazilian national. So we always try, and our partnerships help us a lot in conveying that message, and the numbers have increased. One thing, if you allow me, because I would like to mention, because I think integration and helping, this is all part of the effort. When we established these partnerships here in Massachusetts, I mean, it's the first time this is being done. Of course, it's a challenge. We are learning along the way. We have to train people. We have Brazilians who get involved with us, like Liliane, like Irmã Elisete, Márcia, Lydia. And then we say, I mean, what is the added value to that? I mean, people, as I said, they are fearful. Many of them don't have their driver's license. Coming to Boston is like sometimes traveling to a different country. And that was an old demand from the community. So what did we do? We decided to go where they are. So that's now why we are with churches, NGOs, churches of different denominations, and I always say that because, I mean, I have to work with the people who are here and who have a constructive role in the community. So we go there. And what numbers do we have? I would like to share that with you, because in 3 years we were able to have the consulate now preparing about 30% of all documents, passports, powers of attorney, birth certificates, marriage certificates, electoral registration, because we're going to have elections now in October and everybody has to register. About 30% of that is not done in Boston. It's done outside Boston in distances that go, for example, we go to Hyannis every fortnight to provide services. And occasionally we go even to places like Martha's Vineyard. Then it's a different thing because the partnerships are established and they are there every week talking to people in direct contact with us. This makes us very proud and very grateful. But I would like to add one benefit that people will say whether they agree or not with me. People left Brazil many times. They did not leave because, I mean, maybe if they could have stayed there and have better prospects for life in terms of job, education, maybe they would have stayed there. One thing we notice is that sometimes people are sad, if not resentful, about the fact that that their mother country did not offer what they would expect in life. And then they have to go away and they have to separate from family. That is something very serious. And then you have a consulate, which is a representation of that country, a representation of that state. And then how are we going to interact here? Am I going to be in the minds of the people, let's say that entity, that stays there, that I have to deal with when I need a paper, or are we going to get closer? I'm talking about, how do you say, encountering, meeting your country again. I think this happens when I go to events in the community. The sense I get is that somehow I think together, we are helping to bring people closer to Brazil and at the same time be more capable of having, let's say, a fuller life in the United States. I mean, that's the objective. And that, of course, involves culture, education, gastronomy, going to the fairs, to, going to Brace when we have the July and June fair. That is very important because it's like, work in the heart as well, because the heart hurts.
I'm glad that Giovanna, my colleague, mentioned another way of getting this dual citizenship. I mentioned the way in which people who have the Mexican nationality go through the process of acquiring the American nationality. But what about those, mostly kids, who were born here of Mexican parents, and they are, believe me, by hundreds of thousands, that by the mere fact of being born here have the American nationality, but not yet the Mexican. Yeah. The consulate has also a very important program and a strategy to pursue parents to register kids in the consulate. And this comes even furthermore because of what's happening since January of last year. This front page of Time magazine is a very crude X-ray of this problem. Ripped apart. Ripped apart. Mom with 2 kids. And in the inner section, by dad, I love you. This is what we don't want, and we want to avoid. Torn families. So this is why we've developed this strategy, and I'm very thankful to the church that allowed me to go into Mass on Sunday to tell my fellow Mexicans that they should ought to go to the consulate, free of charge, register their kids. In case of deportation, if it's not impossible, it could be very, very difficult to go and take your kids at home with you. And if they remain, the destiny is a foster home. So we want to avoid this. And I am happy to say that in the last year, the registration rate elevated in 300% upon this strategy. That's another way to get the dual nationality and prevent the problems of deportation.
Given the national situation in the United States and the creation of, my count is more than 3 million orphaned children by the government sending parents out of the country and leaving the children behind, we have an enormous challenge. And you are speaking to the heart, I'm sure, of everyone here who's concerned about family stability and family welfare by addressing that issue and addressing it with compassion and also with an understanding that there are means and methods that people should follow. We have 5 minutes left. I want to try to answer anybody who has quick question, right? No speeches, but a quick question, because some of you are critical partners already working with the consulate. Some of you have no idea about the strength of these resources. Here's a chance for a quick question. I should have given you a warning.
Yes?
Going once, twice. All right, so I'll ask the question.
I want to acknowledge the presence of our dear friend and colleague, the consul from El Salvador, Rudy, is just arrived. Thank you very much for joining us, Rudy.
Rudy, do you want to come up and introduce yourself and say hello? All right.
What was your question?
So our brothers and sisters from El Salvador are in a different situation than either of these countries because of the nature of the end of TPS and the way in which our government is treating the tens of thousands of people who are going to have adjustment of status, where we are adding. Kevin, what was your number today? The United States in the last year with the president has added 1 million new people to the rolls of undocumented. We've added, right, we're talking about changing things. The way the government's acting in the United States, we've added 1 million people to the categorization of being undocumented because we've taken away documentation from people like the DACA folks each day who lose status, and many with TPS. Rudy, I'll come to you in a moment after you get your breath, but the question to that I'm concerned with to wrap up here is the community probably doesn't know what you wrestle with, but it's probably helpful for us to hear what are the things that frustrate you the most in being consuls. You are asked for something, you are in a position of power. What frustrates you the most about what you can't do for people?
I wouldn't say exactly frustrate, but I would say it's a big challenge. And Giovanna mentioned it to a certain degree when she said in reaching the people, because one of the things that fortunately my government and throughout the network has learned is that you cannot remain in your office and expect people to come to your office for all these services, not only the documentary services of passport, the registration fees, etc., but also for the other that I mentioned before, the Windows Health, etc., etc. You have to go to them. We've developed a program called the Mobile Consulate. And throughout the year, on Saturdays, we go out from Boston to Vermont, to New Hampshire, to Rhode Island, to Maine, and the upper north of Massachusetts, to the community, to be near them, to tell them, here is your consulate. The main philosophy of this is, I want, and this is my strongest challenge on the almost 2 years that I've been here, not really frustration, but challenge, that to get close to the community, to make the community feel that they have their consulate here and that the consulate can help them in going about their main problems, particularly during the present administration.
Very positive.
Yes. Well, I feel very much the same as Emilio's. I wish we also have mobile consulates. We move around. I just wish we had more time. I wish the day had 48 hours. I mean, I feel the urge to do a lot of things. I don't like saying no because I think it's always easy to say no. But it's when we say yes that we get things done. But of course, the day has 24 hours and we need to sleep and we have family and so on. So lack of time in view of the magnitude. We are talking about a community here that we estimate, I mean, the American census puts the community at about 90,000 people in Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire. We know it's much more than that, maybe 3, 4, 5 times more than that, and that's what we see. Only passports in 4 years, we issued over 66,000 passports. So not almost everybody came for their passports in that period. So it's a lot of people, and we need time, and it would be good to have more staff at the consulate. It would be good to have more money, and because I think we have, and we meet a lot. I mean, we have a Latin American group, and Mexico is a staunch let's say, leader, supporter in El Salvador as well, and colleagues who are not here today. And we meet and we talk and we think about joint initiatives. So we just need time, because help we have from the community, a lot of help.
Yeah,
It's
a good reinforcement of why you work so strategically with partners, because the partners extend your reach and your compassion.
Definitely, yeah.
Rudy, thank you for sneaking up here at the very last moment. I'm going to give you just the last 2 minutes. Tell us what the Consulate of El Salvador is doing right now to respond both to the changes with TPS and what services you're able to provide for the residents in New England.
Thank you. My name is Rudy Lasso. I'm Consul from El Salvador. I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you.
The language is one of those, ¿cómo se dice? Challenge. That our community facing every day. We have to improve our service and the consulate. For our communities, it's like even better.
I will do my best to translate so that he can speak in his own language and he can be comfortable talking about initiatives they do at the consulate.
Gracias. We should have done that earlier.
Gracias. Deje ya de...
Thank you.
Sí. Bueno, decía que el lenguaje es uno de los obstáculos que enfrenta nuestra comunidad. La migración tiene muchas causas.
So language is one of the barriers that our community faces, and immigration has many causes.
Nuestro gobierno de El Salvador está impulsando muchas medidas para evitar esa migración.
Our government in El Salvador is actually making the effort to prevent some immigration.
Pero es un camino complicado. Hay situaciones que están fuera de las manos.
But it's a challenging effort. There are certain situations that are completely out of our hands.
Es difícil salir de un país donde prácticamente tenemos todo. Tenemos un buen clima, tenemos una excelente vegetación, buenas playas, pero es una realidad.
So it's very difficult to leave a country where we have everything. We have a great climate, great vegetation, great beaches.
Pero algunas políticas del pasado, yo recuerdo que de los años 70 nadie emigraba. Hay situaciones que se dieron de otros países que afectaron este tipo de acontecimientos de ahora.
So the political situation in the 1970s, no one was immigrating, but politics in some other countries actually contributed to the immigration situation.
Sin embargo, estamos tratando con la gente del TPS, hay un comité de TPS que está haciendo un gran esfuerzo. Hemos apoyado desde el consulado y seguiremos apoyando.
We are working with the TPS committee to help those who are dealing with the TPS situation.
Quiero ofrecer una disculpa, venía un poco tarde por muchos asuntos, no sé, estoy un poco, venía como corriendo del parqueo y eso me pasó.
I want to apologize for making here at the last minute, but I've been very busy and finding parking was also challenging.
Okay.
Well, thank you for
Thank you
coming,
very
though,
much.
Rudy. Thank you. So, on behalf of all of you, let me thank our very distinguished panel and remind you that the front line, in a sense, of government response to those who are the newest in our neighborhoods is not the U.S. government. It is the governments of their own home countries who stand in solidarity with open doors, with ready services, with creativity, and with a commitment to work well with partners and with the church. And for that, we should all be very grateful for a tremendous effort to be sure populations are stable and treated with dignity and given opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Professor, if you allow me, I would like to say something very important now that I have you here. So I just want to say that we have a very good practices with the Brazilian consulate. In our centers, the second important services that we provide to our communities is through the consulate services that we bring to the community, to the local community. So I take advantage of this moment to tell you how important it will be for us to create a new collaboration relationships with Mexico and with El Salvador to bring I know there is a lot of challenges, but there is a lot of things that we can face together in the community. So our centers are open for you to duplicate these practices. So thank you so much. Just taking advantage.
Well said.